Hello AP World History students, Mr. Lassiter here with you. And in this video we're going to take a look at time period 6, the home stretch as we prepare for the AP World History exam. We're looking at the years circa 1900 to the present, accelerating global change and realignments. This video, we are looking at Key Concept 6.1, which deals more so with that accelerating change. As you watch this video, I encourage you to take a look at the packets linked in the description down below, as well as any other videos that are linked there too, as you try to prepare for the AP exam. These videos are meant to be an overview of the information, so if you need more information or want to go deeper in the topic, I encourage you to take a look at Freemanpedia or AP Worldopedia, two of my favorite sites, although they are not affiliated with these videos. Or take a look at your textbooks, or, of course, go ask your teacher. So let's get started with Key Concept 6.1, which reads, Rapid advancements in science and technology altered the understanding of the universe and the natural world, and led to advances in communication, transportation, industry, agriculture, and medicine. As we get started with Roman numeral 1, looking at the rapid advancements in science that spread throughout the world and these new technologies, we're going to try to get an overview of what those advancements in communication, transportation, industry, agriculture, and medicine were, and then we will look at some of those effects. So, to begin with, new modes of communication and transportation reduce the problem of geographic distance in our world. If you think about the course as a whole, in our first time period, people mostly dealt with their immediate location. And there might be some regional trade. As we went into time period 2, we saw the development of interregional trade. In time period 3, we saw the intensification of that interregional trade. And by the time we get to time period 4, Europeans have crossed the Atlantic and we actually see a global world develop. And from that point, all the way up until the end of the course, we've seen that global world become more and more integrated, more and more closely connected. And our technologies dealing with communication and transportation have facilitated that. For example, in the late 19th century, we see the invention of the radio and the telephone, which become staples in the 20th century. And those are improved upon further, the development of cellular communication, the availability of the internet to the general public. These have made communication instantaneous in our world, so much so that I would bet you might be even watching this video on your cellular device, your iPhone or your Android or whatever it might be. Of course, transportation has also been a major technology that has reduced this problem of geographic distance. In our last time period, it was trains and steamships, and in this time period, it's automobiles and airplanes that have brought people closer together. And hopefully one day, space elevators brought to you by Elon Musk. But these new modes of communication and transportation, of course, have spread throughout the world and have helped bring people together. And that's really their lasting legacy. Now let's take a look at agriculture and changes that have come about due to science and technology there. And the big thing to know for time period 6 is about the Green Revolution and commercial agriculture, which have increased productivity and sustained the Earth's growing population as the use of chemicals have spread and the use of genetically modified forms of agriculture have spread. Now, the Green Revolution, if you do not remember this term, was a large increase in crop production beginning in the 1960s. Achieved by the use of fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, as well as high-yield crop varieties, genetically modified crops or genetically modified organisms if you've seen them labeled at your local Whole Foods. The Green Revolution used these advances in science to produce crops that were insect-resistant or disease-resistant or produced more of a grain per each plant per acre. What that has done is increase wheat and corn and rice yields around the world, helping to sustain our ever-growing population, and in some places allowing our populations to grow. Of course, this does put pressure on our environments, and it does lead to some concerns about intellectual property on over genetically modified organisms. In addition to the Green Revolution, commercial agriculture has increased productivity. For example, we see economies of scale as large corporations begin farming bigger and bigger areas of land. We also see advanced irrigation techniques. These corporations can afford to use fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, GMOs in their farming as well to increase crop yields. So these are some changes that we've seen in agriculture as a result of new science and new technology. We also see this with the medical profession. Medical innovations have increased the ability of humans to survive and live longer lives. And the two most significant of these are the use of vaccines and antibiotics. For example, in the developed world, there is not much concern over polio or smallpox. In fact, it's eradicated. The use of vaccines have been able to do this. You have probably received a vaccine for measles, mumps, and rubella or something similar, maybe chickenpox. But these vaccines are meant to fight viruses that had previously ravaged humans or shortened human life. Antibiotics have had the same sort of effect against bacteria, and we can even prolong people's lives with artificial organs or organ transplants. But vaccines and antibiotics are the two that are in the key concepts, and you should certainly know as some of the most significant medical innovations that have proliferated in the 20th and 21st centuries. And lastly, of course, technology has impacted industry and our economies. And one way we see this is with energy technologies, which raised productivity and increased the production of material goods. The two energy technologies that are listed in your key concepts, of course, are the use of petroleum, which has been the dominant energy source in the 20th and 21st centuries, and something we see develop in the second half of the 20th century, nuclear energy. Of course, more and more we're relying on renewable energy resources, but we have not quite tipped over enough in that direction to decrease our reliance on petroleum. So, taking a look at these technologies, we see communication, agriculture, medicine, industry, almost every aspect of our lives has been touched by some of these major advancements in science and technology. Of course, our population has grown at an unprecedented scale in this time period as well. And as a result of this, humans have fundamentally changed our interactions with the environment. Basically, we've seen a lot of negative effects on the environment by humans interacting with it and taking a lot from it. For example, human activity has contributed to deforestation, desertification, an increased consumption of the world's supply of fresh water and clean air. It has increased pollution of the air and water. And humans have competed over these and other resources more intensely than ever before. We've even seen that some of those technologies we were just talking about have increased our competition for certain resources. Rare earth elements like bauxite or lithium, those are needed to make our telecommunication systems work. You have some of those resources within your cellular device. And of course, our competition over them is becoming more and more heated. Of course, as we try to take these out of the earth as fast as possible, we're going to leave some environmental damage. In addition to that, we've seen that humans have released unprecedented amounts of greenhouse gases and other pollutants into our atmosphere over the last 200 years, and that has contributed to human-made climate change. Greenhouse gases like methane, nitrous oxide, carbon dioxide, that are byproducts of power plants or transportation or agriculture, industry, the production of electricity. These have contributed to what is called the greenhouse effect. Of course, we've seen our global temperatures rise, especially over the last 20 to 30 years. We've seen them rise at unprecedented levels. And while the key concept says that these greenhouse gases and other pollutants have contributed to debates about the nature and causes of climate change, if you ever watched John Oliver, you might have seen the episode where he breaks down this debate. And it's actually scientific consensus. Over 97% of scientists agree that humans are impacting our climate with the way we are currently behaving. And it is something that, of course, has been in the news daily. The last thing I want to take a look at is key concept 6.1, Roman numeral 3, and looking at demographic shifts caused by disease, scientific innovations, and even conflicts. First, I want to look at this population graph. This shows everything from about 1750, when the Industrial Revolution began, the beginning of time period 5, projecting out to about the year 2100. And what we've seen is that the world's population has doubled and doubled again and doubled again. We currently have somewhere in the neighborhood of 7.5 billion people on Earth, rapidly approaching 8 billion people on Earth. And of course, this type of population growth has put pressure on our environment. It has required us to make major changes or major developments in technology to keep up with this. And we've seen it to this point. But diseases, scientific innovations, and conflict have impacted some of the trends of this population growth. And so I want to take a look at that now. And we're going to start with diseases. In this time period, in the 20th century, we see that some diseases have persisted, even with medical innovations. There are certain diseases that we associate specifically with poverty. Diseases like malaria, tuberculosis, and cholera are found in areas of the world that are still developing or perhaps are economically disadvantaged. Of course, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has made it a priority to try to eradicate malaria, and it is possible. It has been eradicated in most of the developing world. So these diseases, though, do persist, and other diseases have emerged as new epidemics and threats to human survival. For example, in 1918, following World War I, an influenza epidemic affected the world, killing millions of people around the world. Emergent epidemics in Africa, the Ebola outbreaks of Central Africa and most recently West Africa, of course, have caused panics around the world. And ever since the 1970s and 80s, we've seen greater attention given to HIV and AIDS. Of course, now it is possible to live with HIV and AIDS, but these diseases, when they emerged, took a lot of science's attention as we have been learning to deal with these epidemics. And depending on where in the world you are, you may be more at risk of some of these. Of course, as our lifestyles change, we see other diseases that we have to worry about. For example, as our diets change, we have seen, or as our diets have changed over the last century, we have seen a rise in cases of diabetes and heart disease. As people's lives get longer, we've seen an increase in the rate of Alzheimer's worldwide. So these diseases are something that we need to keep in check. Of course, science and technology is learning more about them as we go and trying to combat them as best we can. But we do still have a long way to go. We are not quite disease-free. This graphic, by the way, was put together by Freeman PD. If you have not been there yet, there are a lot of really good graphics in this unit that have been put together on that website, and I highly encourage you to take a look. I couldn't find anything better, so I decided to pull it in. Thank you to Freemanpedia for that. Now, I did mention about different trends in demographics and our population growth. And what we have seen in the developed world is that while populations might be rising, the population growth rate is actually slowing. And part of that is due to new or more effective forms of birth control, which have given women greater control over fertility and transformed sexual practices. Birth control, such as the birth control pill or other contraceptives, the availability of abortion in the developed world, has led to a decrease in the fertility rate, or the average number of children had by each woman in a particular place. And so as we see those decrease and family sizes decrease, of course, we're going to have social changes, but we're also going to have economic changes. For example, as populations eventually decrease in some of the developed world, there are a greater availability of jobs that are needed to make the society continue to run. We've also seen social changes, cultural changes as well. For example, the sexual revolution in the United States in the 1960s and 70s. We've also seen greater opportunities for women as they've had fewer children. Women have been receiving higher levels of education. The levels of women in higher ed are greater now than they ever have been before. We're seeing greater participation of women in politics, in professional, in the professional world than we ever have before. And so these advances in science and these scientific innovations, of course, have led to major changes on that front as well. And the last thing that we're going to look at certainly connects to Key Concept 6.2 and global conflicts. Of course, a lot of our technologies that we think about relate to war. And new military technologies and new tactics and the waging of total war led to increased levels of wartime casualties in the 20th century, especially for World Wars I and II. Now, a total war is a war in which every available weapon is used and the nation's full financial resources are devoted to winning that war. So we see wars in which everyone, not just soldiers, are active in putting forth the goals of a nation. And this might be in the creation of these new military technologies or the deployment of them. Some of the new military technologies that you should be familiar with, of course, are tanks, planes, and in World War II, of course, the atomic bomb, which entered us into the atomic age. There are new tactics, specifically trench warfare that we see, or firebombing in World War II, that have led to an increase in wartime casualties, both among civilians and the military. And of course, we will see in Key Concept 6.2 the consequences of these global conflicts and these new technologies that developed. That's it for Key Concept 6.1. And I just want you to think about the trend of accelerating global change and the role that science has played in that. And of course, the role that our use of technology and our use of the environment has caused in accelerating environmental change as well. That's it for Key Concept 6.1. We'll see you in the next video. Have a good day.